Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new episode of Stories from Space podcast, where your host, Matthew Williams, examines the history of human spaceflight, the breakthroughs that revolutionized our understanding of the universe and our place in it, and the brave individuals who work tirelessly to advance the frontiers of our understanding. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
The squabbles of nations on other worlds will soon become as distant to people living in space as the squabbles of ancient city-states are to us today. It could be the end of nationalism as we know it.
The authors acknowledge that this podcast was recorded on the traditional, unceded lands of the Lekwungen peoples. Welcome back to Stories from Space. I'm your host, Matt Williams, and today, part 2 of my interview with famed science communicator and publisher of the Cosmic Companion, James Maynard. I want to ask you, as a science communicator who's been just covering this stuff for so many years, what would you say are some of the biggest or most relevant news and developments lately? Now, Artemis 1, I would certainly agree that was a very, very relevant one. And I wanted to ask your opinion, too. David Brin, famed writer, he had a controversial opinion, which was to say that, yes, that the SLS is going to be obsolete very soon, and that this represents essentially a waste in resources, because as soon as the Starship flies, it's going to be the most powerful rocket ever. And, well, I found myself disagreeing with this while respecting the points he raised, strongly disagreeing with this. But I wanted to get your take on it. It's like, well, the SLS, yes, it is using technology that has been folded over from previous space programs. Yes, the Starship will technically be more powerful once it's launching. And yes, NASA has contracted with SpaceX to provide the lunar landing for Artemis 3. So, having said all that, is the Artemis program and the SLS, is this something that is worthwhile?
Absolutely. And here's the deal, okay? I absolutely support the mission of SpaceX. I love the private developers, especially the ones coming up with incredibly interesting ideas. You know, there's one company that's just figuring out how to fling satellites into orbit without using rockets, which is pretty cool. But let's take a look at what SpaceX has accomplished so far. The furthest they have ever flown a human-rated vessel is 535 kilometers up, or about 360 miles. Okay, they achieved that during the Inspiration 4 mission on September 21st, 2021. All right, that distance of 535 kilometers is 0.15% of the way to the moon. All right,
Yes,
that is basically 1/6 of 1% of the way to the moon, the very same moon that NASA just did freaking loops around. Okay?
Yes.
All right. So now, to me, I love some of the ideas. I love Starship. I actually have a big plaque here in my studio with a cool retro picture of Starship, but it is nothing compared to Artemis 1. What SpaceX is doing could provide some fabulous new technologies in the future. But to say we should shut down the Artemis program because of what SpaceX is doing is like saying, let's shut down Boeing and Airbus because some kid just built a really cool go-kart.
Okay, putting that very straight, very frankly.
Don't get me wrong. That go-kart technology they could develop could have some great benefits in the future. But as of right now, no.
Yes. And I definitely think, there's a lot of ideological nonsense floating around there, too, about how, the private sector can do all this. We should just contract out to them, let them do everything because, government agencies can't do anything.
Yeah, SpaceX has brought down the price of lifting things to low Earth orbit dramatically. That's great. That's a fantastic advance. Let's take advantage of that. But moving beyond LEO, Musk can drop me a line when he reaches 1% of the way to the moon with a human-rated craft.
Yes. And while Musk was developing all this reusable rocket technology, which is very exciting and very opening up new possibilities, NASA was sending probes to the farthest reaches of the solar system. So let's
beyond.
Yes, let's keep things in perspective, people.
Right, exactly. Right. And ESA's doing fantastic work. India, China. There's a lot of really amazing things going on right now. And I'm really looking forward to the future of space travel. This is kind of interesting. Going back to Carl Sagan for a minute. In Cosmos, he imagined a distant future where Americans built spacecraft that went long distances carrying Soviet-designed or Russian-designed craft that did not go as far, but they could launch a whole bunch of them along the way. So it was like one long line of a limb of a tree with several branches coming off of it as a way to explore the universe. And nowadays, of course, Russia has pretty effectively dropped out of the space exploration business, with the exception of Luna 25 coming up. But the idea is there still that perhaps these, conglomerations, these programs that bring together governments and private organizations can use a similar idea to explore the planets and beyond, using this branching system with private industry making up the short hops, equipment for the short hops.
Yeah. Well, so would you say it's fair to say that the new space industry, right, their role is they're providing necessary support along the way, but the big leaps are the ones where NASA and ESA and the World Space Agencies come in.
Right. That's the way I see it for the foreseeable future.
And yes, well, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's the real message of the new space age, and something that, these contractors certainly would agree with. It's like, no, we need those government contracts, right?
And again, I mean, NASA, yes, is a government organization. It can be bureaucratic, but also a lot of that money is going towards supporting families and supporting people who work on these programs. And I may not have this number exactly right, but I remember reading the other day, believe that something like 400,000 people had a hand in building Artemis.
Yeah, it sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, that to me is just amazing. Yeah, and how many of those people are going to go on to have kids that fall in love with science and become science communicators 30 years from now?
Well, I hope a lot.
I hope so as well.
Not too many. We need several of them to go into the STEM so that the science communicators have stuff to write about. But
absolutely,
yeah. Well, let's see. So, and you mentioned Russia, so that too, I would argue, is another really big issue right now. And that, of course, is Russia withdrawing from agreements, other agencies terminating agreements of cooperation with them. And do you imagine that this is going to be a long-term trend, that Roscosmos is going to be isolated and not doing much anymore? Or are you more optimistic? Do you think they'll turn that around just as soon as the current crisis is over?
I think there's a couple things going on here. First, I try to go to when I research things, I try to go to primary sources, primarily. So when I read about the Russian things going on with Roscosmos and the Russian space program. I enjoy like being able to look at, I can get these documents translated from Russian into English. Let's say Putin, getting Vladimir Putin getting updates about these things. And it is just so consistent when you read these records of conversations that he's had with Roscosmos, that he has zero vision for space. They quite frequently, every couple paragraphs, they'll ask him, do you have any questions? Yet. Do you have any, we're doing this, we want to do this, we want to do that. Do you have any questions? Yet. No. Just all the way down. So I think they're really suffering from a lack of interest in science at the very top. And so that is a major problem for them as long as Putin remains in power, which is probably going to be the rest of his life.
Well,
okay.
Fingers crossed that won't be very long.
So I think there's that problem. And but I definitely have hope that one day, Roscosmos can bring Russia back to the glory days of the Soviet space program when they launched the first man and then the first woman into space. They of course launched the first satellite. And what's interesting is, even in the early space race, even when Russians made an advance, it inspired people in the U.S.
Oh yeah, I remember reading about Yuri Gagarin doing a world tour after he went to space, and he was loved and well received. And he himself, they said his smile caused a thaw in the Cold War because he was a very, very nice guy and had a very photogenic smile. And
Right.
I heard similar things about the Apollo astronauts. In fact, they visited the Soviet Union to
Yes, they did.
give talks. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it is amazing. Space is a great unifier when in fact it's allowed to be used that way, right? Well, and now China, as a rising space power, they've garnered a lot of attention. Do you think that going forward, there needs to be better cooperation between China and NASA and other space agencies?
Ideally, yes. I am in favor of everyone going to space. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I want NASA to succeed. I want the Chinese National Space Agency to succeed. I want the Indian SpaceX and the smaller companies all to succeed. And I believe that is really the path to our future, because these things are so big when you look at them. These habitats on the near the south pole of the moon, for instance, are going to be so complex both to build and to maintain that it's not going to be able to be done by one nation or one corporation or one mad developer. It's going to have to be an amalgamation of different governments and private organizations and NGOs coming together. And that, I believe, holds a surprising hope for the future. And that's because let's imagine we're 100 years from now, okay? We are 2122, and we now have 2,500 people living on the face of Mars. All right, 7-year-old girl lives there. Now, her great-grandparents first came to the Red Planet, but neither she nor her parents have ever once stepped foot on the face of Earth. Their habitat was built by NASA. Their shuttles that bring them food and water are Space Y, the new, SpaceX, whatever. The air is supplied by the Chinese, the water by the Russians, and now there's some squabble on the face of the Earth. To whom are they going to owe to whom will she owe allegiance, or her parents? And the answer is no one. the squabbles of nations on other worlds will soon become as distant to people living in space as the squabbles of ancient city-states are to us today. It could be the end of nationalism as we know it.
Oh, that is a very quotable quote right there.
Thank you. Feel free to quote.
Well, absolutely, because yes, that's one thing definitely am fascinated by is if we're going to have multiple space agencies and nations exploring the moon and Mars and beyond and establishing settlements there, then what's going to happen when the nations of Earth start to, or in fact, will this be like another scramble for colonies, which will lead to conflict back home, right? Another age of imperialism. But I very much like the idea that the people who live there, well, for starters, if this is being done within the confines of the Outer Space Treaty, and yeah, the people out there are going to have no interest in participating or inciting conflicts back home, and will most likely say, figure it out amongst yourselves if and when such conflicts happen. Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because it's not at all like colonies overseas where getting there is quick and easy. Like
exactly. And living there is quick and easy. If, a new volcanic island erupted, in the eastern Atlantic, sure. Freaking every country with a military would probably be there in a week trying to claim the area.
Yes.
Right? But that's because living on islands is easy. Living in space is hard. And no one can do it alone.
Yes, and getting there. Well, imagine, if you will, the people of Mars are saying, we're on strike. We're not sending home any rare earth metals until we get a say-so in what's going on around here. Also, we don't like the way you guys are fighting and how that's affecting us. It's like, well, we're sending in the Marines to take control of the colony. It's like, oh, okay, well, we're not going to be at opposition for another 12 months, and then it's going to take them 6 months to get here. So, yeah, good luck. See you in 18 months. We're going to dig trenches and be ready for you. Yeah.
Well, I mean, not only that, but think about it. It's not just one colony. Or one habitation, it's one settlement. Other settlements as well are going to be maintained by different combinations of the same organizations and nations. So, you can't say if the U.S. were to try to say, we're going to eventually send some Marines over to take over Colony Alpha from the Soviets. The Soviets or the Russians still have dozen or 100 other settlements in which they are participating. And they could make things really bad for the U.S. really quick. Yeah. And it's infrastructure. That's the thing, okay? Infrastructure is, as a historian, that infrastructure is huge in war. Even the greatest threat that the so-called Western world has had was the potential takeover by Nazi Germany in the 1940s, okay? And even Adolf Hitler, with one of the greatest militaries in history, was not able to take over an island 26 miles away from occupied France. And why couldn't he do it? I've gone through that channel before, okay, the English channel. We can do it in half an hour through the channel now. But he did not. Even then, he did not have the infrastructure to move enough people and enough supplies 26 freaking miles over water to take over a country much smaller than those he had taken over previously. And the reason is infrastructure. You can't move this stuff. You have to move huge amounts of stuff constantly and maintain it, food and water. All the supplies. It's why Napoleon ran out in Russia. He just couldn't run his supply lines long enough.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to prevent one person or one nation from taking over in settlements in space.
Yes. And I point out too, here on Earth, where the geographical barriers were involved, right, like the English Channel, and You try to move stuff across there. Meanwhile, they're shooting at you the whole time.
Right.
Yeah. It's like in space, it's much worse. Not only do you have to travel much, much further through a much more hostile boundary, just the vacuum of space, but yeah, you are still being shot at there. Radiation, cosmic rays, and yep, by the time you get there, it's like, well, we can't breathe here without being inside a settlement or without pressure suits and so forth. So the infrastructure is way more important out there. You can't even breathe or take a sip of water there. So you not only need to bring all that with you, you need to have an atmosphere with you that doesn't get breached. Yeah.
And it's said, this story is probably apocryphal, but she never denied it. But it's said that the anthropologist Margaret Mead identified the earliest existence of civilization as being a femur bone which was healed. All right. Oh. Meaning, now this is an injury that normally would kill animals or primitive hominids in the wild. But because it was healed, that meant that the person was cared for by others, that they were provided for long enough so that they could recover and get back to hunting and foraging and what have you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah.
And that is what that is. And when we get into space, all of us are going to have a proverbial broken femur.
Yes. Well, yeah, we will not survive without a really robust support system.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And that's why I believe moving into space is going to be part of this huge shift, this huge nexus happening in the next 20, 30, 40 years. And it's just going to change the human race forever.
Well, yeah, in fact, a lot has been said about going to space and the overview effect and how that alters a shift in consciousness. But yes, it has been said, but I don't think it's been like really, really properly articulated yet that, well, going to space also, it'll make honest people out of anyone who does go, because it's like out here, you can't just look out for yourself. It's impossible. There has to be support, and yeah, there is no survival or success without people relying on each other. And I think we do see that here on Earth with people who are in remote communities or highly dangerous places. Yeah, places where life is just harder than it is in a major city or a place where there's tons of infrastructure. And so, yeah, the people look out for each other. It's just what they're used to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Space, I think, will. That is a very good point. I hope to hear more thinking like that making the rounds soon. It's like, yeah, space is the ultimate challenge, and it will strip people down to their unselfish core.
Yeah, and not in an idealistic way, I'm pretty sure jerks are going to be around with us for as long as our species is around. But as a whole, as a paradigm for society, I think we're going to be moving a lot more in that direction.
Yes.
And here's something interesting. You talk about cities. Now, I don't have these numbers right in front of me, but something like half of people in the world live in cities right now. And within 20 years, that number's going to go up to, I believe, like 67%, 68%, something like that. And that's going to include something like 85 or 90% of people living in the U.S. will be living in cities. And cities, as we've seen, do change the way society functions, because we learned that we have to depend on people in order to live, in order to get things done and have a functioning society. And it's really a net benefit to people to be cooperating with others and to live within these interconnected cities and city-like environments that we're going to find in space habitats of the future.
Absolutely. Well, I feel we could talk forever about the issues here, but in fact, there are several more I could think of, but I think we definitely tackled the biggest ones there. So, my last question for you will be, as hinted earlier, you have been doing this a while and there have been lessons that you learned along the way. Any that you care to share? Any
Uh,
particularly interesting ones?
I think honestly enough to how interesting this is, but I guess my biggest thing is, if you can try to do what you love.
Hmm.
I mean, I realize how fortunate I am to be able to follow my life's dream of, of spreading science education to everyone and breaking down barriers to education and hopefully pushing our species toward the nexus, toward our big next step in evolution. And there are going to be days plenty of days that I just, suffered from very real imposter syndrome, fear that what I was doing wasn't good enough or I wasn't good enough to be doing what I'm doing, and the answer is if you're doing your best and you're trying to make a difference, a positive change in the world, you're doing a good thing. And just really keep at it. And things are going to change. Things are going to go ways that you don't expect. And just biggest advice I can give is just believe in yourself and believe in your mission in life because it's important to you. It's probably important to others as well.
Wow, yes. And well, I've heard this now from many science communicators, and it totally resonated with me to the point where I realized I think this is something that we all share is that this idea that on the one hand, we're doing this because we love it, and that is, yes, the best thing you could hope for from your life's work, that you actually doing something you enjoy, because then yeah, it doesn't feel like work and you can only get better at it. And of course the pervasive feelings of, oh, I don't belong here, these other people are better at this than I am. And it's like, well, they're all thinking that, so either everyone's correct or everyone's wrong. Well, that's very encouraging too. And I myself found it so encouraging to hear people like Dr. Cyan Proctor, who flew aboard
Yeah.
Inspiration 4. She
Yeah.
said she suffered from that all her life. And I heard that NASA scientists and people that we would consider to be celebrities in space and aerospace and commercial space have said the same thing. And I thought, wow, I saw that as very encouraging. I'm sure you found that too. It's that this is something that other people who do what you're doing have also struggled with that.
Oh, absolutely. I've heard the story so many times. It's but I think it's vital to believe in yourself and just try to make a change in the world if you can. And I realize not everyone can, but if you can do it, do it. Believe in yourself.
Yes, do what you love and the money will follow sooner or later, right?
At least the happiness will follow. The money
Yeah,
may
yes.
come in third or fourth after that.
Yeah, you can't quite maybe say eventually it'll follow. You might want to give it a time and keep your day job in the meantime. Jeez.
Yeah, well, everyone has different life circumstances.
Mhm.
Eating is nice.
Yes. Yes. Got to
Um,
keep food on the table in the meantime.
But I was gonna say, I'd love to just, see people come and take a look at what I'm doing at thecosmiccompanion.com as well as thecosmiccompanion.net and put out a weekly show with interviews with scientists, authors, and developers from around the globe and fun, friendly interviews. The show is occasionally humorous. And we also have a 3D environment with a virtual lunar base you can play around in. And if you want to get the show every week, sign up, go to thecosmiccompanion.com, sign up for the newsletter, and I'll send you the show every week.
Yes. A highly rated news show, folks, and trusted news source. And in terms of your books, there's The Light of Alexandria, which is, yeah, about science in the ancient world. And you have articles featured in Tech Times.
Yeah, I've written thousands of science articles in my time for different organizations. Right now, I am concentrating so much on bringing science education to everyone. It's my primary focus, and we have a pretty intricate lunar base and media room, and now a lava planet you can walk around in 3D space and learn about geology and exoplanets and lunar research and all that sort of thing. And you can get to that through the cosmiccompanion.net, or it's built in Second Life. If you already have an avatar, you can just go into Second Life and search for the Cosmic Companion. You'll find it. What I'm really trying to do now is to use these newest technologies of 3D design, the metaverse, artificial intelligence, all merging them together in a way that's hopefully going to bring science education to as many people as possible and tear down barriers to education, things that are preventing people from learning and loving science. Because I want to spread the light of science to everyone.
Absolutely. Probably one of the best things we can do right now. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was a real treat, and I hope we get to talk again. Well, we'll see.
I enjoyed this talk so much, Matt. It was absolutely fabulous talking with you.
No, you too. I'm really glad your publicist put us in touch.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's amazing. Shout out to Abby.
Yep. Thank you, Abby, for making contact. Yes. So, a reminder to all my listeners, please check out the Cosmic Companion and sign up for its newsletter. In the meantime, I'm Matt Williams. This has been Stories from Space. Tune in next time. Hopefully, we can have James back again.
That'd be great. I'd love to come back on. It's fabulous talking with you, Matt. And clear skies to everyone out there.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stories from Space podcast with Matthew Williams. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.